Welcome everybody to Death Valley Insider's first live post-game show. Um, I'll just get this out the way and just be honest. Not a great way to kick off things for our first live. That's not how I planned this game to go. I actually predicted LSU to cover the 56 points and they'll go over. I'm sorry, the 56, cover the 2.5, and it just didn't go that way. They started off, kind of hot, kept hot, cold, hot, cold. Um, the thing that bothered me, I think, the most was just the sloppiness of play tonight. I really was not impressed. They showed flashes of their potential, but they never actually lived up to it. You would see plays here and there, like when you start off the game with a 55-yard completion to Trey Bradford on your very first play of the game, or run pass option, play action fake. Bradford fakes the handoff, runs a wheel route. He's wide open because the defense is focused on Neighbors, Lacey's, Mason Taylor, everyone else, that he just sneaks out of the backfield, is wide open, catches the block, and almost took it the distance. When you start off on your opening play like that, you typically think that, okay, here we go. Let's get the ball rolling. However, it just never turned into fruition. Nothing ever developed. Nothing ever went further than here's a play here, here's a play there. Offense, defense, or special teams. Rude of me just not to introduce myself. I'm Jermaine Every, analyst over at Death Valley Insider. You can see right there. You can follow me on Twitter at @the_Jermaine. Same thing on Instagram if you'd like to follow me there. But just I was just not impressed with the team tonight. They showed some things and flashed some things. However, they never fully just show what they're actually capable of consistently enough, long enough for anyone to say, hey, you know what, this team is really special. Just looking at some stats and some numbers and whatnot, one of the other things that stuck out was also the number of missed tackles. There was an inordinate amount of missed tackles that I did not like. There was a lot of sloppy play, the muffed punt, the drop passes, just missing guys in coverage. Just one of the things that I was impressed with was they didn't start getting gashed by the run until later on in the game when the defense was just dead tired because they had been on the field so much. It was after a couple of turnovers, back-to-back scores. FSU ended up having 31 unanswered points. LSU only had not even 100 yards of total offense in the second half. So there was a lot that I just was not happy about. There were some good things to be impressed with throughout this game. Perfect example. I love the way the defense stepped up, especially the defensive line in the absence of Mason Smith. They were not allowed to be completely gashed up the middle with the run, and they didn't really get gashed, like I said, with the run until later on in the game after the defense had been on the field for a while and they've grown tired. And it was just out of hand at that point. They were down by 2 or 3 scores, and it got out of hand, which is to be expected. When that defense plays that much and they're on the field that much, there's not a whole lot you can do besides trying to rotate guys in and out, in and out, in and out. So it was just one of those things where, what can we do? What do you do when you're trying to establish yourself, establish a culture with this team, with this new coaching staff, only being here for a year now. You don't want to get the season started off on the wrong foot. However, a non-conference loss to a fellow top 10 team who's probably going to be a top 5 team after this week, who looks like they could be the class of the ACC, isn't necessarily a bad loss. A loss is a loss, of course. But this kind of loss isn't going to reflect as badly on LSU as, let's say, dropping those inexplicable games in the middle of the season to a conference opponent who's deemed as a less worthy opponent. For example, if they were to drop a conference game to someone like the likes of Missouri or Tennessee or someone like that, someone not as highly thought of this season. Not saying that those guys are on their schedule by all means, but I'm just saying when you drop a game like that inexplicably in the middle of the season, or you have a bad quote unquote win against a team like Troy, for example, that's when the committee tends to look at your team and say, hey, are these guys really worthy of being in the college football playoff? So a loss like this, yes, it looks bad. It was a 4-touchdown, a 27-point loss. However, they can still overcome this, but they got to remain perfect for the rest of the way. They have to bare minimum win the SEC West and most likely do the unthinkable if they have to face Georgia again in the SEC title game and overcome that monster who's looking to three-peat right now. So there's just a lot going on with LSU right now, and let's just hope that they can – a 45-24 loss, 21-point loss. I'm not going to lie. I was so, focused on getting this set up, and towards the end of the game, I just kind of tuned out the end of the game, and it's on, it's in the background, but it's a frustrating loss to sit there and watch. If you're a fan of the team, I can understand your frustrations. I can see that. I can appreciate that because there's just no excuse for this team to look like that and play like that. Some of the other things that just caught my eye throughout this game was the way that Jaden Daniels continues to have to be a Josh Allen basically for LSU. They're relying on him way too much to get the run game going. I fault not him. I don't fault the offensive line. I don't fault the play calling or anything like that. It's just something has to be done in order for them to further establish the run. So they're going to need to work on that more, whether it's, changing guys up, getting guys healthy, whatever it is. They're going to have to figure some things out with the run game besides having your quarterback run the ball 15, 16, 20 times a game. That's just not a good formula for success. Off-schedule plays or every so often calling Jaden Daniels' number to run the ball, that's one thing. But when you're constantly having to rely on your quarterback to produce runs and run plays and keep the defense honest, eventually he's going to get banged up. It's just proven that quarterbacks cannot do this and carry teams on this level of college football, playing in the SEC and playing a top flight schedule like LSU plays, minus a few gimmies here and there. But even in the NFL, you see guys like Lamar Jackson and Josh Allen, guys who are more athletic, who tend to take chances when they do run the ball. They get banged up. For example, Jaden had a play where he took off running up the middle and tried to hurdle a guy and looked like he got a WWE body slam or something like that put on him because he just couldn't hurdle the guy. He tried to hurdle a guy in the middle of a pile, middle of a scrum, I should say. And it just didn't go well for him. Good thing he got back up and finished the game, but it just looked a lot worse than what it was. And those are plays that you don't want your quarterback taking. You don't want him making those kind of plays. You want him to be more conservative. He's going to run, get down and slide, or get out of bounds. If you can't get down and slide or get out of bounds, make sure you're not taking a crazy hit because there's only so many hits and so many tackles left on your card before it's marked up. And now, what do you do? Another thing that stuck out to me in this game was the play of Kyron Lacy. He had a couple of good plays in this game, and he looks like he can actually be the guy on the opposite side of Malik Neighbors. I also saw Jaden Daniels rely on Mason Taylor, the starting tight end a lot. He also hit some guys out of the backfield and whatnot. So just there's certain flashes, like I said earlier, that I saw that I'm really interested in seeing how this team develops further. Um, Also, some other things that I think I liked on defense was even though Deuce Chestnut and the defensive backs just got torched by Coleman, they were in his hip. The height differential played a bit of that, but I mean, Coleman was he was basically the best player on the field tonight, if we're just truly being honest with ourselves. While, it's not ideal for the other team's wide receiver to be the best player on the field, it's still an indictment on what LSU was able to do as far as bringing pressure up front. Because one of the biggest things that I kept writing down when I looked over my notes was uh, pass rush lane responsibility. And if you're not familiar with that, you have your defensive ends, you have your defensive tackles. Everybody has a lane when they rush the passer. You want to form a pocket and keep the quarterback inside of that pocket. If you don't keep your lane responsibility, that's when the quarterback can escape the pocket. There was tons of times where I saw, for example, Mekhi Wingo and let's say Jordan Jefferson, they're up the middle, but they're almost crisscrossing, banging into each other, trying to beat a double team or get to the quarterback, pushing the pocket up the middle where they're leaving a lane up the middle. Or I'd see one of the defensive ends kind of come too far inside or rush too far outside, giving him a lane to escape the pocket, either around the pocket or up the middle towards one of the left or the right end. But when you keep your lane responsibility and you're rushing straight forward and you're staying in your lane, you're creating that pocket. You're making sure the quarterback stays in the pocket. And eventually you're hoping that, one of your defensive linemen can win a one-on-one or slip a double team and push the pocket, making him uncomfortable. However, LSU wasn't able to do that consistently enough tonight. They allowed Jordan Travis, to get outside of the pocket and make a lot of plays. And when he's getting outside of the pocket, it's leaving those DBs out there. A lot of those guys who have just transferred in and guys who weren't planning on being starters initially had to step up in practice, this summer and in camp to be starters, like Deuce Chestnut and Zay Alexander. One thing that Jefferson did point out to me was that I believe it was Mason Ryan who was playing a lot of corner instead of Deuce Chestnut to start. He picked up on that earlier and was like, I'm looking for the note here. He said that, he noticed that Chestnut came in the second quarter. Yeah, Sage Ryan, I'm sorry, was playing for most of the first quarter. Now, sometimes when you see a guy sit out the first quarter or something like that, it could be due to some inter-team discipline or, he was late to a practice or something like that. You just never know. Maybe Sage Ryan was, there could have been a number of things going on. However, Deuce came in, he played pretty well. He got that pick on that bubble screen early on in the second quarter to kind of take away from that turnover from the muff punt. However, there were plays where he just could not make a play on the ball or make a play on Coleman enough to make a difference in some of those deep balls down the field. I am LSU Sam writes a comment on the YouTube. It says he's totally embarrassed. A pathetic effort. I'm ashamed to be a Tiger tonight. He thinks we should bench KD, cut Anderson. Kelly is on a very hot seat. The Tigers weren't ready to play and compete. I appreciate the comment, appreciate the passion, LSU Sam, but let's hold off on benching Jay Daniels. Let's not cut Anderson just because he muffed that punt. And I don't think Brian Kelly's seat is very hot at all. He's entering his second year. Usually under my philosophy after, watching this and being in sports media for a while, I always say give college coaches bare minimum 2, maybe 3 recruiting cycles before you make a judgment on them. So again, I say give them 2 or 3 years. 2 years if they're just abysmal. 3 years if they've had, one bad year, maybe an okay year in the first year, and you're just kind of like not liking the direction of the program, give them that third year, see where they're going to go, and then cut ties. But you got to give a coach at least 2 recruiting cycles in order to come in, establish the culture and the type of players that he wants in his program, and also to kind of build forward. Because what if the personnel that he had on the team coming in isn't exactly the personnel that's going to match what he wants to do moving forward? So you always got to give a guy a little bit of time. Jaden Daniels, coming into the season, I wrote the article maybe a week or so ago, was the second leading favorite for the Heisman. He did not help his chances tonight with the performance that he had. However, he can always get back in that race and with, a couple of big performances somewhere down the line. So let's not, react too harshly. It was the first game of the season. Guys are going to get nervous. They're going to have jitters. So let's not like pick things apart and be so quick to pull the trigger on putting BK on the hot seat, benching Jaden Daniels, getting rid of Anderson. Let's give them some time, let them cook. It's just like let's say if you're cooking a good gumbo, you gotta peel and devein the shrimp. You gotta cut up your sausage. You get your chicken ready, and get the crabs and make your roux. You don't want to burn your roux. Like there's a lot that goes into making a gumbo. It takes time. Give it time. Because if you just try to whip up something really quickly, oftentimes it does not taste as good as when you take your time and make it and give it that full love and attention. So LSU Sam, I am LSU Sam. I'm sorry. I appreciate the comment, but let's relax a little bit. Let's not get too hastily and start pulling the triggers on getting rid of coaches, benching quarterbacks, and getting rid of guys on the team. There's some other things that kind of stuck out to me as well throughout this game. For example, when I looked at who's going to be the Osceola, the guys over at Florida State's rivals, we did a little crosstalk, and they asked who besides Malik Neighbors would be the top receivers on this team, and I named Kyron Lacy and Mason Taylor as those guys. The leading receiver was neither of those three. It was not Neighbors, it was not Kyron Lacy, and it was not Mason Taylor. It was Brian Thomas. The 6'4", 205-pound junior out of Walker, Louisiana, had 7 catches for 142 yards and a touchdown tonight. The reason being that I think Jaden Daniels started to go to him more was because I noticed that Florida State was doubling Malik Neighbors almost every play. I mean, when you look at the game and you're watching, one of the things that I've learned and picked up on is where do wide receivers line up? 9 times out of 10, Malik Neighbors is going to line up out wide. From there, you want to look at, is the corner pressed up against him, like in press man, or is he in press zone? And what is the safety doing? Where is the safety on that side of the field? Every time Malik Neighbors lined up, the safeties knew where he was, and they floated over the top. So therefore, their corners, whether they were playing zone or man, stayed in press. So that way they could kind of play underneath because they knew they had safety help over the top. So what you're doing is they're creating a bracket coverage. The safety's going to play over the top. The corner's going to play underneath. That way they keep Malik Neighbors in between the two of them. Wherever he goes, wherever he runs, it's going to create a tighter throwing window when you have a guy underneath and a guy over the top, which means Jaden Daniels couldn't really look for Malik like he wanted to. Then you look at Kyron Lacy. Okay, this guy's 6'2", 215, a bigger body. However, when he's looking for Lacy, Lacy's getting locked down as well because they know, like, okay, hey, if we take away their number 1 guy, we got to make things difficult for the number 2 guy. So someone else has to step up. Mason Taylor stepped up really good because he's a big 6'6", 250 or so pound target in the middle of the field for someone like Jaden Daniels that he can easily find. However, Thomas, with his big frame and he's seeing more one-on-one coverage, he was able to get open more and allowed himself to just be open, and he basically just took advantage of the way that they were bracketing Malik Neighbors, kind of spying on Mason Taylor and keeping an eye on Kyron Lacy. Well, then there's Thomas sitting out here like, hey, well, if you guys are going to do that, well, I'm going to try to eat. And basically what he was doing was he was getting open when they played one-on-one and finding openings in the zones and sitting in them when they play zone. A great way to get yourself ingratiated to your quarterback when you can find openings in a zone, sit in them, and create a throwing lane and a target for your quarterback. One of the biggest things that some wide receivers do not know how to do is create a target for their quarterback. You want to show him your numbers if you're going to face him, and also make sure you create that separation when you're running through zones or if you're playing man. So I thought that Thomas did a great job of that, especially when he's being, left alone or not really being paid attention to because they're focusing so much of their attention on Neighbors, Lacy, and Smith. I'm sorry, Taylor. Looking at some of the other receivers, Malik Neighbors did end up with 6 catches, only 67 yards with an 11.2 average as long as it was 21. Of course, Mason Taylor had 4 for 39 as long as it was 15. Kyron Lacy only had 3 for 37, but that 33-yard completion was a big completion when they needed it most to try to set up a score. So even though he only had 3 receptions for 37 yards, and the bulk of that came on that one play really opened things up. And I think that forced Florida State to kind of focus and pay attention to Kyron Lacy more, as opposed to like, hey, we can just one-on-one him and he'll be fine. But even still, LSU is going to have to do something with the running game, because when I looked at the running game, they ran the ball 27 times for 113 yards and 2 touchdowns. Out of those 27 carries, Jaden Daniels had 15 of them. Josh Williams had 4, Noah Cain had 4, and Trey Bradford had 4. Those guys combined for a whopping 49 yards on those 12 carries. Most of that came on Josh Williams' 35-yard run that came at the end of the half to set up that field goal. So when we're looking at this team and we see some of their deficiencies, one of the turnovers that they had was an interception by Jaden Daniels. Now, Malik Neighbors happened to fall down on that play. It was like I want to say it was like a comeback route looked like, or an out route. And I guess Malik lost his footing or something happened. It wasn't a pass interference thing or anything like that. So there wasn't a flag that should have been thrown. But he couldn't keep his feet. He fell down. The defender saw the ball coming. It was an easy play. He made the play. Hats off to you. However, if Neighbors didn't fall down, it would have still been difficult for him to come back to that ball and make that play because of where the ball placement was. He would have had to fight off that corner in order to try to make a play. Best case scenario in that situation, he catches it. Worst case in that scenario is exactly what happened. He fell down and there was a turnover there. So besides that, the other turnover that the team had was the fumble. The muff punt, if you don't count the 2 turnovers on downs. Those plays were crucial in the way I believe the game was called, because if you're inside the 5 or inside the 10, it's 4th down. My thing is, take your money. All money ain't good money when you're gambling. However, when you're playing the game of football and you're trying to win a game, and especially in a close game, you're playing another top 5 team, you're inside the 5. Sure, you want to punch it in for 7. Just take the 3. Take the points, walk away, live to fight another day. Rely on that defense. Let them lead you to where you need to be. If you have to kick field goals and play defense, kick field goals and play defense. But without a consistent running game and without the pass game just constantly hitting on all cylinders on a more consistent basis, going for it on 4th and short inside the 10 or inside the 5 is not going to be the way to win football games. This team is going to have to start kicking field goals in those situations. I could see if it was like a 40-something, 50-something yarder where your field goals kicker's career long or last year's long was a 47. That's different. But when you're inside the 5 or inside the 10, or what some people like to call the green zone, inside the 10, whenever you're in the green zone, score. Take the points. 3 is more than 0. 7, of course, is more than 3. But the opportunity to get that 7, if you don't make that fourth down play like they did on those 2 possessions early in the game, you fail to score. Now, let's just take a look at what the game could have looked like had they kicked those 2 field goals. Let's say they kick those 2 field goals. Maybe Florida State comes out and they don't try to answer right away. Maybe they're calling the game differently right before halftime when they're down 14-7. Instead of being down 14-7, what if they were down 17-7 or 20-7? They're going to call the game differently because now you're down by more than 1 score. You're going to want to feel a sense of urgency. You may tend to pass the ball, take more chances, and things tend to snowball from there. So we can't just look at we missed those 2 field goals, we missed some opportunities, but it wouldn't have made a difference because we lost by 21. You have to look at the game in the moment. And in that moment, when it's 0-0 on your first possession and you've had a big play to open the game, you need to take advantage of that big play by putting points on the board. The way you put points on the board, if it's 4th down inside of that scoring range, just kick the field goal. Take the points. Move on. Going for it, I get it. Maybe one of those 2 times, yes. The first time, okay, we tried it. They were inside the 5. The team says, hey, let's try this, let's try that. And if you're in the coaching staff, you're thinking, okay, we tried this already. It didn't work. Next time you're inside the 10, not necessarily inside the 5, you try it again and you still don't make it. Now you've had 2 possessions inside the 10-yard line and you fail to come away with points. So it's no longer, we just missed this. No. Then Florida State goes down and scores a touchdown to answer you. And now you're sitting back and you're like, oh, wait a minute. We could have had 3. We could have had 6. We're at 0 now. It changes the way you call your game, and it's going to change the momentum in the way the opposite team calls their game as well. So you can't just take things like that for granted. You can't take it and say, hey, you know what? Screw this. Let's just willy-nilly and go for it. This team was not playing consistently enough to say, hey, you know what? I think I can rely on my defense to make a stop, get the ball back, and we'll go at it again if we miss it here. Your offense was not playing consistently enough to say, hey, you know what? If we don't make it, if we don't score anything on this possession, screw it. We got another possession we can take, and we'll get it back next time. That's not always the way the game is going to go. So that's why I always preach, if you're in the green zone, cash it in, take the points. Some other things that kind of stuck out to me as well was the play of Jordan Jefferson, the West Virginia defensive tackle transfer. Played very well. Mekhi Wingo, who's bestowed the honor of wearing the number 18 this season, very well. So the loss of Mason Smith did not hurt as badly, like I said before, because some of those guys really, really stepped up their game, and I was really proud to see the way those guys played and balled out. Florida State did end up with 135 yards rushing on 34 attempts for a 4-yard average. However, like I said, they didn't accumulate a ton of those yards until later on in the game. One of the other things that I thought was a big stick out in the game, besides the 2 turnovers, was LSU's 3rd and 4th down efficiency. They were 3 of 10 on 3rd down and 0 for 3 on 4th downs. Meanwhile, Florida State was 9 of 14 on 3rd downs, and they converted their only 4th down. So when you combine Florida State going 9 of 14 on 3rd downs, they converted their only 4th down. LSU had 2 turnovers. Florida State only had 1. Of course, the time of possession as well, 35-23 to 24-37. One of the other telltale factors that didn't really show or rear its ugly head was Florida State outrushed LSU by 22 yards. So when I tend to look at a game, I tend to break it down into little segments that'll give me a sliver of a piece of an idea of how a game played out. Looking at the stats after watching the game with my own eyeballs, it totally told the story. 3rd down efficiency, Florida State won the rushing battle. They won the turnover battle. They won the time of possession battle. Typically, when a team wins the rushing battle, the turnover battle, time of possession battle, and they convert more efficiently on third down, they're going to win the game. That is exactly what happened in this game. Those guys were more efficient. They made more plays when they needed to make more plays, and they ended up winning the game. Plain and simple. It wasn't that LSU ran, a ton more plays than Florida State did, because they really didn't. There was not a huge play discrepancy as far as the number of plays run by each team. What Florida State did was they took advantage of what they had in front of them. So when there was a third down to convert, they converted that third down. When there was a play to be made outside of the pocket, Jordan Travis seemed to make those plays, whereas Jayden Daniels did not. When there was a turnover on the opposite side, LSU got that interception from Deuce Chestnut when he jumped the route on a bubble screen. There was pressure on Jordan Travis. He threw it when he should have just eaten the sack or maybe thrown it away. Deuce Chestnut jumped in front of it, got the turnover, but LSU didn't do anything with it. So there was one turnover each team that neither team did anything with. But when you factor in that other turnover, that was one that Florida State scored off of. So we're looking at, okay, they only won the turnover battle by +1. The other two are null and void because neither team did anything with it. However, that one turnover that Florida State did turn into a scoring opportunity, that's a possession. That's a score. That's one score right there. When you look at going 9 of 14 on third downs and converting your only fourth down, that fourth down, just that one fourth down conversion that Florida State had, extended a drive. When you extend a drive, you keep the possession going. That's another one. When you look at Florida State was 9 of 14 on third downs, LSU was 3 of 10 on third downs. You look at they kept drives alive 6 more times than LSU did. When you just look at the conversions, 3 to 9. They kept drives alive more. They even had more third down opportunities than LSU did. That's not speaking to LSU's defense. That's just speaking of Florida State's offense keeping their drives alive. LSU's defense wasn't able to fully stop them. There was a lot of times on some of these third down plays where Jordan Travis was getting out of the pocket, scrambling around and making plays. Again, lane rush responsibility was a key factor. Another thing that was a key factor was there was a ton of missed tackles. I saw a lot of the defensive backs going for shoulder shimmy tackles and just trying to reach at a guy and drag him down. And the Florida State receivers, Coleman's 6'4", and I believe it's Wilson to the other side, he's 6'7". Where you got LSU who has, they got I think Alexander's like about 6'2", Deuce is about 5'11", but you could see where the height was a difference. And you could also see the level and skill where these guys were able to get themselves open more consistently as opposed to LSU's DBs weren't able to keep up in coverage. Another reason why they weren't able to keep up in coverage was because the pass rush wasn't always consistent. There were some plays where I saw the pass rush was pushing the pocket from either the ends and or the middle. There were some plays where I saw LSU blitzed, 5, sometimes 6 guys. And Florida State picked it up, held the pocket, and allowed Travis enough time to deliver a throw down the field and make more plays. Again, contributing to that third down conversion percentage. So overall, I think this team has a lot to build on. One other good thing that I did see was they only had 2 penalties the whole game for only 30 yards. So if you have only 2 accepted penalties for 30 yards, and I believe both of those were personal foul type of penalties. Whenever you, one was a face mask, and I think one was a late hit maybe. So whenever you only get 2 penalties for 30 yards, you're playing disciplined football. However, you can play disciplined football by not committing penalties, but also play bad football by just playing sloppy. And that's what I saw in the muff punt. That's what I saw. I saw Jayden Daniels. He overthrew, I believe it was Noah Cain in the flat to the left, had him wide open. There wasn't very much of a rush. Sailed the ball like 2 feet over his head. Just little things like that here and there will cause you to take a second guess at a game and look at a game and be like, hey, you know what? If this play could have gone differently in this section, if this play could have gone differently in this section. That's why a lot of the times when you see a 3-touchdown win by another team, it's not always as revealing and as telling if you look at the final score. because when you look at certain plays here and there, this game could have gone way differently. Uh, it just didn't. Things end up snowballing in the end, and like Jefferson pointed out, Florida State ended up having 31 unanswered points until LSU pulled out a touchdown towards the end in garbage time. So when you look at giving up 31 unanswered and the way other things went, there's just not an excuse for playing like this. First game of the season doesn't matter. Well, it's only BK's second year, doesn't matter. These guys lace up their boots, their cleats. They lace up their pads, put on their jerseys. Everybody puts on their helmets. Everybody has the same 24 hours in a day. It's all according to what you do with it. And it wasn't like they weren't prepared, because they had a decent game plan going into it on both sides of the ball. However, when you get your special teams isn't going right and the defense is looking kind of sluggish and sloppy sometimes, they show flashes. Your offense, it'll go for a little bit and it'll stop. It'll go and it'll stop. It'll go and it'll stop. You can't have a stop and go offense, an inconsistent defense, and then bad play. Not just blocking, but also muff punts and stuff on special teams. You cannot play that inconsistently in all three phases of the game and expect to pull out wins. It's just not going to happen. It's something that this team needs to get corrected, and they need to get it together, because once you get into conference play, all bets are off. There's not going to be a game in SEC play where you say, hey, that game right there, we got that game off. For the rest of the way, they got a get-right game, I'll say, against Grambling next weekend. Now, I wouldn't take them lightly. I wouldn't look past them and start looking at the following weekend playing Mississippi State, because, they're a football team just like you are. Anybody who steps on that field can end up winning. Now, the chances of LSU dropping that game or even looking bad next week are next to none. However, I would like to see this team build some momentum. It's like I said, it's a get-right game. It's a team that you should beat by at least 3, 4, 5 touchdowns. So go in there, take care of business, get yourself right, get yourself going before conference play starts. Because when you get into playing at Mississippi State, 11 o'clock in the morning, I know it's not a far trip. It's still a road game, though. And it's still getting up and having to get ready, hours earlier than what you're expecting. So have Grambling come into Baton Rouge next week, stomp a mud hole in them, figure out whatever it is you need to figure out on offense, defense, and special teams, whether it's calling different plays, having different guys return punts and kicks, or, taking some different chances on offense, whatever it is, figure it out next week. That following week against Mississippi State, you should win that game. Don't let Mississippi State get in there with that fun and gun, that Mike Leach offense, rest in peace, Mike Leach, and have those guys on an emotional high. You need to go in there, kick their teeth in, and establish yourself as, hey, look, it's going to be Alabama or us that's going to win the SEC West this year, and lay down the law. Following that, you got the game against Arkansas for the Golden Boot. That's never going to be an easy game, because it's a rivalry game. It's a divisional game, and it's a conference game. So you got to look at, hey, I need to get myself right against Grambling, establish myself against Mississippi State, and then keep the ball rolling against Arkansas, because after that, you got Lane Kiffin and Ole Miss. And it's not going to get any easier from there, because just because you're going to get out of that game, then you go to Ole Miss, as a matter of fact. They're ranked right now, by the way. Then you go to Missouri. Then you have Auburn. You get Army, a week off, Bama, Florida, Georgia State, and that's how your season's going to go. At the beginning of the season, I said this team has the potential to go 11-1, possibly 10-2, because Bama's going to be the toughest game on their schedule. However, they tend to drop an inexplicable game or have a quote-unquote bad win every single season when they're expected to do big things. Losing this game against Florida State was not something that I had in the cards, because I thought that this defense was more talented than Florida State's defense, and I believe in Jaden Daniels more than I believe in Jordan Travis. It didn't go their way. However, like I said before, a non-conference loss to a top 10 team who's going to be a top 5 team, and that team is looking like they're going to be the class of the ACC and possibly represent the ACC moving into the college football playoff if all things, keep going according to their plans, will actually help LSU more than it will hurt LSU. They're still in position to make an SEC title game appearance if they win the West. Like I said before, if they do the unthinkable and knock off Georgia and they win the SEC West, that should put them in the driver's seat to make a college football playoff appearance. But again, it all starts with looking at the film from this Florida State game, figuring out what they did wrong, and then moving forward, getting right against Grambling, gaining their footing in conference games against Mississippi State, and then moving on from there against Arkansas. Then you got Ole Miss. And like I said, the ball just keeps rolling. In order to get the ball rolling, you have to get a win, and you have to start establishing some things and find an identity as a team. And I think that this team's identity this year, unfortunately, is going to be a lot like it was last year, where they're heavily relying on Jaden Daniels to run the football, where he had a school record 885 yards rushing. And I believe the 11 touchdowns by a quarterback was also another school record. This team cannot rely on him to produce runs and run plays. They're going to have to get some production from that offensive line and those running backs in order to establish the run. And then that can open up more things and more variety on their offense pressing forward. So let's look at them to get right against Grambling next week, get the ball rolling against Mississippi State and Arkansas, and then open up SEC play really strongly. Brent Ross, he says, Lacey and Thomas were disappointing. Why didn't they try different wide receivers? Defense in the second half was terrible. Lacey was a bit disappointing. He did have that one big play that I was happy to see because I thought that he could make a difference. Thomas was not disappointing at all. He came out, like I said earlier, 7 catches, 142 yards, and a touchdown. That was a great game from him. So I'm not sure if we're on the same page as far as that. I would say Lacey was a bit disappointing, but also I won't hold much of that against him, simply because when they locked up Neighbors, they knew, okay, hey, we have to keep an eye on Lacey as well. And they just didn't let him get all the way off like I thought he would. Malik was able to still get 6 for 67. But again, just about a third of those yards came on his long play. So there was the 75-yarder from Brian Thomas. There was a 21-yarder from Malik Neighbors, the 55-yarder on an opening play from Trey Bradford, and Kyron Lacey had a 33-yarder. So when you get those explosive type of plays from your receiving core, you would think that it would help the team win and open up some things underneath, because they're kind of taking the top off the defense. However, a lot of those plays were catch and run plays, where guys were catching the ball short, then making a play and getting down the field, getting yards after the catch. But it's frustrating when you see a guy like Keon Coleman go for 9 catches, 122 yards, and 3 touchdowns, and his long was only 41. It just goes to show you that they work the field, all over, on all 3 levels, underneath, middle, and over the top, to the point where you see Florida State's guys and you're just like, wow, why can't we do that? Well, the reason why is because Florida State made sure that their quarterback stayed pretty clean. He made some heady plays that Jaden Daniels just simply didn't make this time. And there were times where he, like I said, he sailed the ball over a running back's head. He kind of threw it short. The pick that he threw, it's debatable whether or not he should have even pulled the trigger on that play, because even if Neighbors had stayed upright, it probably wouldn't have been a completion, so he should have looked elsewhere anyway. So there's just some film watching, some decision making that he's going to have to take on from there. But Brent, I don't agree with you on Thomas. Lacey was a bit disappointing, although he had the one play. Trying the different wide receivers, I'm not sure. That's something that, hopefully someone maybe could ask the coaches or BK in a post-game press conference or in a post-practice media availability sometime next week. The defense was pretty terrible in the second half. And like I said earlier, I attribute a lot of that to them just being on the field so damn much and just, getting worn out and tired. There's just only so much football that you got in you for you to keep going out there, keep fighting, keep playing, stay consistent. It happens even in the NFL. These guys are professionals getting paid millions of dollars, and eventually they're going to wear out as well. So you can't expect the defense to stay on the field 35 plus minutes a game and expect those guys to stay fresh. No matter how many times you rotate guys in and out and try to keep them fresh, it's just not going to happen. So the defense in the second half, the only way I can explain it is they were on the field way too much. The offense didn't keep drives alive nearly as much as they should have, and it just led to the defense, unfortunately, just wearing out, especially towards the end. Just looking at some of these drives, there were times when, like the first two possessions of the game, the one by LSU, they had the ball, drove down the field quickly, failed to produce points. They had the ball for 3 minutes and 6 seconds. Florida State gets the ball after that turnover on downs. They go down the field, 9 plays, 86 yards, 4 minutes, touchdown. Whenever you fail to score on your opening possession despite a big play, you turn the ball over on downs, and then you give up a touchdown, you're not only giving up that touchdown and you're down now by a score, but you're also giving up the momentum. LSU came back and they answered, hey, boom, we're going to score as well. Great. The teams traded punts, traded the ball on downs. There was a fumble, interception, punt. LSU took the lead. Okay, great. Now that we've taken the lead, what are we going to do? They went right back and gave up a 10-play, 75-yard drive that lasted 5 minutes. Florida State ties the game about a minute before halftime. That drive right there let me know that this game is going to stay close. And this lets you know, okay, Vegas, when they came out with the line, LSU by 2.5 points as a favorite, probably going to come into play. Luckily, they were able to make some plays, and they hit a field goal right before, right as time expired. They went up 17-14 right at halftime. They come out the gate, give up a field goal to tie the game. Next possession, LSU drives the ball, get a couple first downs, they punt. When they gave up that touchdown, they were down 24-17. That is when I got nervous, because Florida State should have scored a touchdown on their opening possession of the second half. Luckily, the defense stepped up, stopped them. LSU, however, couldn't hold on to the ball, got a couple of first downs, really didn't do anything with the ball, punted it. When Florida State got that possession back and scored that touchdown, they were up 24-17. I felt there was trouble on the horizon. Main reason is when you come out and you barely scrape by and get a field goal right before the half to go up by 3, but then you backdoor on opening possession of the second half and give up a field goal to tie the game, you can't put any more points on the board in your following possession to give up another touchdown. When we look at Florida State's 3 consecutive possessions to close out the first half and the 2 possessions to open the second half, touchdown, field goal, touchdown. What did LSU do in between? End of the half, field goal, punt. That's what they did in between. You can't give up a swing like that where the score goes from 14-7 to 24-17 and expect to win the game, especially after Florida State goes up 24-17. You throw that interception, then you give up another touchdown. Whenever you have compounding bad plays like that or compounding bad possessions, especially, that's a recipe for a disaster. And that little wheelhouse right there is where I believe that this team not only lost the momentum, but they also lost the game. The Thomas dropped a critical pass. Most of his yards came on that one play in the fourth quarter. Yeah, he did. And a lot of his yards did come on that one huge play in the fourth quarter. However, let's just take away for kicks and giggles, let's just take away that 175 yarder. Now we're looking at Thomas had 6 catches for 67 yards. He basically did the same thing Malik Labors did. If you take away that 175 yarder, he basically had the same production as your best as LSU's best wide receiver. So I'm not gonna fault him for dropping the pass, because there was a couple of other guys that dropped passes as well. The pick wasn't Jaden Daniels' fault, Brent Ross says as well. Yes and no. When you look at the play, sometimes there's not very much a coach's film or all 22 film, as they call it. But if you ever get your hands on some of that coach's film and you go back and you watch a play fully develop from the eye in the sky, as they call it, you'll see where there were other guys that he could have thrown that ball to. And there was also the, let me throw it away. Because on a play like that, whether it's an out route or it's a comeback route, it's a timing route. So it's I'm going to count 1, 2, 3, or 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and then just throw the ball. However, when you're scanning the field and you're counting and you're timing that play, boom, 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 and you're looking and making that decision, you need to be aware of what's going on around you. What could have been a better play? And his ball placement on that play is what makes me say, yes, it was partially his fault because of the ball placement. If that ball was more to the outside shoulder and sailing out of bounds, the corner could have still tried to make a play on it. However, it wouldn't have been right in his breadbasket. So that's why I say, Neighbors fell down, and it wasn't completely Daniel's fault, but it was partially his fault because of where he placed the ball. He placed the ball more on his inside shoulder instead of his outside shoulder. Just something that small can make a 2-step difference in a DB trying to recover and make a play on the ball. And it can mean the difference between an interception from that ball being placed on the wrong shoulder and the DB maybe either getting a pass breakup or not even making a play on the ball because the ball is placed on the outside shoulder, sailing out of bounds. On plays like that, you want to throw the ball where only your receiver is going to have a chance to catch it, or nobody's going to catch it because it's too close, too tight. The DB was right in his hip pocket. And when Neighbors fell, it fell right in his breadbasket. Again, like I said, he placed the ball in the wrong spot, so it made the interception even easier. If he places the ball in the right spot, that's probably not an interception, even if Neighbors fell down. So we can agree to disagree on that one, Brent, but I will say that, yes, that interception was still partially Daniel's fault. If you guys have any questions, comments, concerns, anything like that, please feel free. We're going to do this after every single LSU game. Doesn't matter win, lose, draw. If it ends at, 3 o'clock in the afternoon, 1 in the morning. Death Valley Insider and myself, we're going to be here on the YouTube Live. Maybe next time we can get some participation from some of you audience members. Maybe we may hold a contest or something to have one of you guys kind of co-host the show with us or come on live with us for a little while. We're probably going to get some of our other contributors from the site to hop on here. I know Jefferson may be a little camera shy, but we're going to get him on here one of these days, one of these post-game lives or something like that. But I really do appreciate you guys participating. Georgia Bulldogs football, what was the thinking on the 4th downs? Did Coach explain? I'm not sure Georgia Bulldogs football because I have not been watching the post-game scrum or anything like that. Believe we'll get more insight on that once we watch the post-game interviews and stuff and kind of get an idea of what they were thinking. But 9 times out of 10, just from my perspective, what I can tell is that they had plays dialed up. The one where Jaden took the sack, he looked like he had a guy open on a Z out, a little zigzag out route. But the defender, again, was right on his hip, so he would have to throw that ball into place, towards the pylon, low and away, or something like that to get his I want to say that was Mason Taylor on that side. I'm not quite sure. On the other play where it was a run-pass option and he got hit in the backfield, that looked like he was going to take off. He thought if he had an option to throw the ball, he didn't have a lane. He kept the handoff because of the read that he made that they were keying in on the running back, so he kept the handoff, and it just ended up not working out. execution is everything in plays like that. So if you can execute those plays, you look like a genius. They called the fourth down play, they dialed something up, scored a touchdown. Genius. When it doesn't work out, you don't look so smart. And I won't necessarily blame the coaches for calling those plays, and I'm not going to always forcefully blame the players for not executing those plays. There were just 2 times where things broke down, and Florida State just happened to make a better play on defense than LSU was able to execute on offense. It just happens. Georgia Bulldogs football. It just felt like it gave FSU so much momentum and confidence. It did. And when you stop someone that's well within the green zone in scoring range, inside the 10 or inside the 5, and they come away with no points and you get a turnover on downs, that's a huge win. That's killing 2 birds with 1 stone, because not only did you stop them from scoring, but you got the ball back in your hands, in your offense's hands. So not only did you stop them from scoring, but you gave your team another opportunity with a possession. So it's a double-edged sword right there, and it does give a team a lot of momentum, and confidence in what they're doing and executing. So plays like that tend to really swing a game. And like I said, another swing in this game was at the end of the half when LSU went down, Florida State went down, scored a touchdown to tie the game at 14, held LSU to a field goal, came out, they tied it with the field goal, made LSU punt, scored a touchdown, scored another touchdown. So it's like things kind of just build on top of that. And when you have big momentum swinging plays and that momentum is compounded, it's a snowball effect. It's like one thing after the next, after the next, after the next. And I think that eventually LSU in the second half, when they started off the second half as bad as they did, they never fully recovered from that. And I think a lot of that came not only from missing those 4th downs, but also failing to score when they could have put points on the board. Because if you put points on the board earlier in the game, when you come to the end of the half, you're calling the game a little bit differently when you got a lead as opposed to you're tied. You're calling the game a little bit differently when you have a 2-score lead as opposed to a 1-score lead. So just little things like that sometimes can end up just taking things in a total different direction. I just got a text message from a friend of mine. He was just like, what were they thinking? What were they doing? I just don't understand anything that happened in this game. And I mean, there are some things that turned out great. There were some things that turned out really good. Like, I was really happy to see the defensive tackles, the way they look without Mason Smith there. I believe they do need to get some more pressure off the edge. Again, pass rush responsibility lanes were a big issue. Missed tackles were a big issue. Excuse me. I wouldn't be surprised if this week there were a ton of tackling dummy drills, and there's a ton of pass rushing drills in order to make sure guys are staying in and keeping their gap responsibilities. Because when you fail to rush your gap or stay in your gap and you're creating lanes for quarterbacks, athletic quarterbacks are going to find lanes to run. More accurate pocket passing quarterbacks are going to find lanes to throw. Either way, if you're not, collapsing that pocket, keeping that guy in that pocket, or at least making him uncomfortable in that pocket, you're not doing your job. And the longer you give a quarterback to throw, the longer your DBs have to cover. And it doesn't matter if you got Deion Sanders back there. Nobody can cover for that long. Eventually, somebody's going to break free. Somebody's going to break open. And a quarterback who's worth his weight is going to find someone open. And that's one of the things that this team is going to have to tighten up and fix before you get into SEC play, when you're playing against much higher levels of competition, much more competent quarterbacks, so on and so forth. Not to say that Jordan Travis is a subpar quarterback or that Florida State was subpar competition. It's just that when you get to playing teams in your own conference, they know you more intimately. So they play you year in and year out. A lot of these guys have played against each other in high school, so there's a lot of familiarity there. A lot of these coaches have known each other for years and coached against one another. So there's a ton of familiarity there. What this team needs to do, again, like I keep going back to, is establishing an identity, not only on offense, but also on defense. What do we do well that we can dictate to other teams when we have the ball? And what do we do well that we can dictate to other teams when they have the ball? And unfortunately, the third phase of the game is still important, whereas special teams, they're going to have to find guys who can at least bare minimum catch and field punts and kicks safely. That was an issue last year in this game. It's an issue this year in this game. Turnovers are going to be a key because when you give other teams extra possessions and you take possessions out of your own hands, especially when you compound that by failing to score when you do get in scoring range, it just makes things a lot more difficult all around. We got some more questions. Our worries that DB showed itself tonight. Hopefully we get better in a hurry, from Greg Lofton. Yeah, Greg, I definitely think so. The injuries, Denver Harris's issue. I think once these guys get fully healthy and there's more depth there, I think, and J.K. Johnson was hurt as well. I think that this team will be okay. It's just getting guys like Johnson and whatnot healthy, getting Harris, ready to play, and just creating more quality depth there. Because you can only next man up so much till you get further and further and further down the depth chart to where things don't always look and feel the same anymore. And once you get to a point like that, that's when your third and fourth, your slot and your nickel guys, your dime and your nickel guys are now starting. Those aren't guys that you want starting on the outside because perhaps they play better in a shorter, tighter space covering a wide receiver as opposed to being a boundary guy. Because some corners play better on boundaries, some corners play better in the spots. It just depends. However, it doesn't matter if those guys can play on the boundary or not. When the talent level continues to drop as you get down the depth chart, and then you have guys that are further down the depth chart that are now starters, you can maybe see a drop off in play. And I kind of noticed that tonight. However, I think that, Florida State's top two receivers, one being 6'4" in Coleman, the other one being 6'7" in Wilson, I think that played a little bit of a factor as well. How different is this game if Mason Smith is available from Georgia Bulldogs football? Honestly, I think it's different in the fact that he would have pushed the pocket from the middle. Some of those runs that Florida State was getting, they never really gashed LSU too badly, but I think a lot of the times those runs wouldn't have gone as far and wouldn't have broken as free as they did. Because to me, if you're getting at least 4 yards a pop, you're doing great because you can run the ball on first, on second, then run it on 3rd and 2, and you got a first down if you're averaging 4 yards a pop. Do the math. However, when you're going for 4, 5, 6, 7 yards a pop in some plays, especially like they were doing in the second half when they really got their run game going, that's where Mason Smith would have made a difference. Not only that, but when it was crucial in crunch time, I think that Smith would have kept his lane rush responsibility up the middle, which would have helped other guys keep their lane rush responsibility. But when you got the defensive tackles trying to crisscross each other, or they're trying to shoot the wrong gap, and then they end up banging into each other, which means you basically got the center and the two guards, and they got these two guys locked up. Well, then now one of the center or one of the two guards can focus on chipping on one of those two tackles on those defensive ends. That kind of stuff happened far too often. Or you have a defensive end who's crashing too far inside that just leaves the outside lane open, where Jordan Travis took off several times and made plays either with his feet or with his arm. So those are things that I think that Mason Smith probably could have helped with. I'm going to love to see getting him back next week and the week after, especially in that first SEC game. So I think once he comes back, that's going to not only add very much so quality depth because he's one of the best players on this team, but I also think that's going to help the run defense as well as the pass defense because his ability to stop the run as well as rush the passer from the inside. Thoughts on Perkins' play inside tonight? Would love to see him get used similar to last season, but I get it. I just think that they're going to pretty much use him wherever they see fit. They want to play him more inside for him to be the focal point of that defense in the middle. Typically, if you have a really good middle linebacker, he's going to be the guy that's going to call the defense, call the adjustments, and get everybody lined up where they need to be. I think he did a great job at it, considering that he played more outside last year. But when you got a guy that talented, that athletic, you want to play him in as many places as you possibly can to get him to kind of raise the level of all tides, basically raise the water level, and get everyone else involved and get everyone else where they need to be and kind of be the focal point of that defense. It's tough to do when you're giving a quarterback 5 and 6 seconds to scramble around and make plays. When you're only giving him 2 and 3 seconds, he can be a much bigger factor. But it's hard for him to be a contributing factor in the game when he's asked to do so much and guys around him aren't really like fully helping him out where he needs to be, especially the guys up front getting pressure. A defense works best when you can just rush your front four and drop 7 into some sort of coverage. If you can get pressure with 3, even better. But knowing LSU's base defense, you need to have that front four get pressure on the quarterback. They tried doing that. They just weren't consistent enough, and it just didn't work out for them. But Perkins, as far as him, I'm going to hold off on saying that it's not a good place to play him right now. He's way too talented, way too good, and the guys around him are also better. I think once those guys start playing a lot better, I think Perkins is going to play better. And like I said, the water will always find its level. All those rising tides will come in, and everything will be okay. It's just going to take these guys getting more consistent, getting on the same page. And again, it all starts with those big monsters up front. You got to get pressure on the quarterback, rushing your front four. That way, when you do decide to bring an extra blitzer or 2, you're really getting to the quarterback and you're causing some confusion, causing up incompletions, and hopefully causing some turnovers as well. We've been here for a while. There's not much else we can say about a 45-24 loss other than, pack it up. Let's see this team try again next week. Thank you guys for your insight, your participation. Brent Ross, Georgia Bulldogs football, Greg Lofton, and also I am LSU Sam. We really appreciate you guys coming in. Again, like I said, Death Valley Insider is going to be here every week after every game, no matter when it starts, when it stops. We will be here, provided that there's no more freak accidents or hurricanes, God willing, that everything's power stays on, everything good. We will be here. We will be presenting you guys with a post-game show every week. So until then, till next week, let the team just lick their wounds, wait for practice and everything to come out. Again, head over to Death Valley Insider, the Yahoo Rivals LSU website. Subscribe to our YouTube channel. We'll be going live on YouTube, like I said, every day. After every game. We'll also be putting together a midweek podcast as well, just going over some other things about the school and the sports and the athletics and whatnot that's going on. So, stay tuned, hang in there with us. We're going to be bringing you guys a ton of good content. So until then, till next week, I'm Jermaine Every, Death Valley Insider. See you guys next time.